This teleforum, powered by Broadnet, is currently in progress. Please note that this call may be monitored, recorded, or rebroadcast.
We're taking action this week, actually, in a bipartisan series of bills. I'm a co-sponsor of several of these different bills that will move forward, such as allowing law enforcement access to this naloxone, which is essentially an overdose reversal medication. We want to make sure we can strengthen treatment and recovery services. We have services like Hazelton in Minnesota that want to be able to assist or get grants to do different programs for rehabilitation. We want to make sure we're expanding education programs and improving medication management for at-risk patients. And so, it's an opportunity actually to make a difference. And while there's no single or simple solution for the epidemic, we can take some very common sense action, if you will, to support state and local government efforts too to combat the crisis. I know in Minnesota they're doing a few things as well. But by empowering law enforcement, student health centers, nursing facilities, etc., we can really fight back against that epidemic and actually make a difference. Again, *3 on your telephone, and you'll have a chance to ask a question. We're going to start rolling with folks. I think we've got Mike from Plymouth who's waiting on the line. Mike, if you're there already, thanks for waiting.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, thanks for waiting.
Yes, I have two young daughters, and one of my concerns is the cost of higher education continually rising. Curious what you have in the docket or on your plan to kind of address that issue. And then I also have a second follow-up on that, too, is I had a possible solution, and curious what your thoughts would be on that. So my idea would be, if I invest money into my daughter's 529K plan,
right,
get pre-tax money, and say they decide not to go to college, what would your thoughts be if I'd be able to do like a one-time transfer into an HSA, which is also tax-free, which would help them manage their health care going forward?
Okay.
So that's the plan that I had, and curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, okay, well, Mike, thanks for raising that. First of all, boy, in the area of higher education, you said you have two daughters, you said. So I've got four, college age, a couple of them, and I tell you, no, it is mind-numbing, right, when you get that bite for what the costs are. And the plan this year is that Congress is supposed to be tackling this reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. And I do really think and believe that all options have to be on the table. Now, there was a recent study from the New York Federal Reserve that found that there was a 65-cent increase for every dollar increase that was given to student loans. There was a 65-cent increase in tuition by institutions. And then for every Pell Grant or financial aid dollar that went to students or to families, there was a 50-cent increase. 50-cent increase in tuition. And so the point there is that inflation has been running much higher at higher education institutions, primarily tied based on the Federal Reserve study showing that a lot of these institutions are basing their increases in tuition strictly off, well, we know our students are going to get X number of dollars in financial aid or X number of dollars in student loans, and they're just building that into the system. And so that has to be looked at, absolutely. So there's no easy answer, but I think that needs to be looked at. Now, some institutions, like I think it's Purdue, have had a freeze on tuition for 3 years, and they're kind of trying to overhaul the administrative component of that. I also think, though, that we should look at how we can increase colleges, the skin in the game that they're providing, that they have to have incentives to deliver a world-class education at responsible rates. Now, one initiative that I think should be considered, and Australia has looked at this in some of their graduate programs, and some have talked about even in the presidential campaign, is having sort of an equity-based payment model where essentially instead of getting a student loan that will be paid back and the student pays it back, there will be a guarantee, so people would invest their equity in students that go to school, and then in return, when the student graduates, no matter what their job is, they would pay back X percent of their salary to that equity or to that institution. And that doesn't mean they have to get a high-paying job. It would be, it could be based on just a percentage of your income. And so, you could actually do some sort of lower-paid job that is, has more self-worth or it's giving back to the community in some component. And then that's the risk that the equity institution would that plan. But that's also another concept that I think should be looked at. And in terms of your thought about allowing 529s, these college savings plans, to be rolled into an HSA if they're not used, that is a real interesting concept. I haven't thought of it, and I'll look into it a little bit. I'm a big advocate myself in both 529s and expanding them for college students as well as for healthcare savings accounts. In fact, I have a specific healthcare savings account bill that allows you to use your own healthcare dollars now, and would expand it for Medicare patients, for active military personnel, for others on Indian reservations. Basically, it's consumer-driven healthcare. So I'm gonna inquire that about the 529 plan being put into an HSA. Sometimes ideas like this take a little time to pass to kind of move forward, and sometimes they can move very quickly, like the Missing Children Bill today, which we introduced and started moving very, very quickly. Again, if you want to ask a question, dial *3 on your telephone. I think we got Gary on the line from Edina. Hey, thanks for waiting.
Hi, Eric.
Hey.
Comment. The question is, as long as Republicans have authority in both houses of Congress, forward with some specific proposals for a couple of the major concerns. Is health care. Everyone says repeal and replace, but there's no replacement bill that has landed on Obama's desk yet. Another is immigration reform. Perfect opportunity to put forth a bill that lands on Obama's desk. I'm sure he would veto them both, but at least the Republicans would get credit for creating a proposal in both cases. My comment is, I hope none of my tax money goes toward bailing out the current Teamsters pension. If that happens, Katie, bar the door. They'll all be at your door asking for bailouts. And I'm sorry for the Teamsters, but the incompetent leadership there has to be some consequence, and hopefully it's not taxpayers that do it. Thanks for your opportunity to ask the question.
Hey, well, thank you, Gary, for sharing those thoughts. First of all, I tell you, I couldn't agree more that Republicans should be offering solutions rather than just saying no on Obamacare, for instance. And this has been a challenge because we have a doctors caucus now that actually is very passionate about some ideas about an alternative to the new health care law and some better ways to do it. But yet everyone in our conference can't see, and the Republicans and even the Democrats actually can't agree on what that replacement should be. And here we've got costs going up still. Your premiums are going up for individuals, for families, for small businesses. And part of it is just making sure we got a healthcare system that is rewarding quality rather than volume, and is extending, essentially make sure we have coverage for those who are most vulnerable. So this is my belief. I couldn't agree more. And I personally have offered and have introduced legislation for chronic care management within Medicare, for instance, which is a different direction for health care, so it's more caring for the patient, not just rewarding the healthcare system for the number of procedures that they do, rewarding activity, right? It's actually rewarding quality. Healthcare savings accounts, helping small business plans and expand that access for employees to small businesses, and making sure that health insurance is portable so you don't get locked in your job, right? So you can actually transfer, you can move, you can take it with you. You don't have to worry about being stuck in your job, or you don't have to worry about being fired and losing your health insurance, or being forced to go on this government exchange system, which essentially doesn't work or doesn't give you real insurance because your premiums are so high and your deductible is skyrocketed as well. I also think the other replacement should be medical liability reform, and also making sure that you can buy and sell insurance across state lines. Why not have everyone compete, just like you buy your auto insurance? On immigration, this is also another challenge. And look, I'm a Republican that actually supports positive immigration moves, but we've been hung up on this too. The president decided to go it alone with his executive orders. That kind of poisoned the well for, inaction legislatively. The courts have rejected the president. He's lost every case, and it's been tied up in the courts. And so that's just not the way to get stuff done. And it also points, I think, to one of the reasons why so many of the bills that I have co-authored or sponsored it's over 90% now are bipartisan. And you got to have relationships with everybody. You got to work across the aisle. You got to shop your ideas around. If it's a good idea, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You just got to make sure that you're getting people to sign on, and then that's how you build momentum. And I've actually gotten quite a few things done this year simply from that perspective, which makes you feel good. But it's a tough environment to do that. And so I actually agree with you. We got to be more about positive solutions. And your comment on the pension issue, I mean, I'll continue to watch. I'm not as familiar with it, but I know that there are folks that want to make changes all the time in these laws, and so you got to make sure you're protecting the benefits that are there for those that were promised the benefits, etc. But you don't want to have a taxpayer bailout situation going on, for instance. Okay, thanks for the question. I guess if you want to ask a question, dial *3 on your telephone. I think we've got Allison on the line. Thanks for waiting, Allison.
Hi. You actually came to my home and introduced yourself when you were first running.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, long time ago, you and your wife. And my question is the correlation between mental health and addiction.
Okay.
How can we get help for people who have addiction and yet have mental health issues? You can't put the mental health people in the general public because they will not survive.
Yeah. Well, and you probably have some experience with this, I'm guessing, based on your question or your comment.
Yes, I do suffer from alcoholism. I've been sober for 7 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I also suffer from depression.
Yeah.
But at this point, one of my cousins is having a schizophrenic episode, and no one will help her. They keep taking her to Fairview, Southdale, and they turn her away.
Got it.
And
yeah.
There has to be something in the healthcare system where you take care of people with mental health and addiction, because the two run together.
Got it. Okay. Well, Alison, let me tell you this. I know, and thank you for sharing your story. There's something like 11 million Americans that have severe schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or major depression, and yet there are millions of people also that are going without treatment. Their families struggle to find the care for their loved ones, and sadly, patients end up in the criminal justice system or in the streets because services are not available. And there is that correlation, or can be, between addiction, as you said, and mental health. Unfortunately, the federal government's approach to mental health has been a chaotic patchwork of all these antiquated programs and ineffective policies across numerous agencies, and it's essentially it's anti-patient, it's anti-family, and it's anti-medical care. Now, there is some legislation. It's bipartisanly supported. My colleague, Tim Murphy, is a psychologist. He's introduced a bill that would make a big difference, and it actually is designed to fix the nation's broken mental health system by focusing programs and resources on psychiatric care for patients and the families that are most in need of services. I'll tell you, I've heard from a number of Minnesota psychologists and psychiatrists, patients, caregivers, the Minnesota Alliance for Mental Illness, a whole bunch of folks, and they think that this bill has a lot of the reforms that are needed to improve the system and help patients, most importantly. So I'm hoping that an issue is going to be moving forward. It actually got through one subcommittee. It's now before another committee, but it is an opportunity to make a difference and hopefully address some of those addiction issues that you actually mentioned as well. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. I think we've got might be Tom on the line from Bloomington. Tom, thanks for waiting.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having these town hall meetings.
Yeah.
I recently was at a meeting where Tom Emmer spoke about, a fellow congressman from Minnesota, spoke about our actions in Cuba. And he was very convincing that we should actually help Cuba now because it only has caused the Castros to make money, and they hold the supposedly the Cuban people hold it against us because we held them down. But the reason is to help them that we don't want other bad actors like North Korea, Venezuela, or even Iran to come in there and be a protectorate for them.
Right.
With more, he's been there twice. In his statements about being there, it's a black market thing. They have little thumb drives that are passed around from people to people. That's how a person that he met. That's how she learned English from watching American television.
Sure.
And supposedly he said that the government knows about this, but they're like turning a blind eye to it right now.
Got it. Well, Tom, look, I mean, I'll give you my views on this. I've been to Cuba once. I traveled there last October. I've always been an advocate for actually lifting the trade embargo. Personally, I didn't think the president went about it in the right way that he went about it, but I think the embargo should be lifted. I think this is used as a tool by the Castro regime to essentially tell its own people that it essentially is punishing that, hey, all of your problems are because of the American embargo. And that's the excuse. And I visited there with people. I visited with small businesses, folks. I visited with families, and they love Americans. They love Americans. In fact, some folks that I know that understand Central South America very well say that the Cuban people are the most pro-American people by far, bar none, in that entire hemisphere. But again, the people are being told that we are the problem, that they can't lift themselves out of poverty. They have a food scarcity issue. I mean, they're literally practically starving there because they don't use their land appropriately correctly. So we have American ingenuity and know-how that can come in there and help them and do all these great things and essentially lift the country up, right, and give them a lot more hope. So I'm pushing legislation for the travel ban, actually, and I'm probably going to sign on to that bill, actually, for the travel ban to be lifted, too, because I think, we've written some letters to allow some country to have access to that. So, I don't think anything's going to happen this year, but I think the stage is being set right now for some, just, I guess, for a different direction. I guess, which I'm encouraged by. Again, if you want to ask a question tonight, dial *3 on your telephone. I think we got Marilyn on the line for Minnetonka. Marilyn, thanks for waiting.
Hi, Eric.
Hey.
Hi. Nice to talk to you. I wrote you a letter about a year ago, and I never received an answer. So thank you for talking to me tonight.
Absolutely.
I received a letter from Medicare, and it was about 7 pages long, seriously, stuffed in a huge envelope, and it was a check, and it was a refund for 5 cents.
Okay.
And to me, Eric, and I'm sure to you, this is ridiculous. Why? And I still have it, and I would really like to have you have it and present it before Congress, because how ludicrous is that?
Yeah. Well, Marilyn, thanks for sharing that. Boy, I apologize. I'm not sure why I didn't get that letter. Usually we get everything, we respond to everything as soon as we get it within a couple of weeks. I would like to actually see a copy of that check. My personal belief is that we must be working toward preserving and protecting Medicare and Social Security at all times for generations to come. And one area where we should start is this, the whole area of waste and fraud and abuse in the system. We've been very successful in rooting out some fraud and abuse in the Social Security disability program with some reforms that passed recently with bipartisan support. We should also be looking at programs to bring, Social Security's technology into the 21st century. Now, with Medicare, there's clearly a lot of paperwork often, and sometimes there's casework involved. And, the situation of you getting a 5-cent refund, it was 7 pages of information with it, just seems crazy to me. So I'm writing down your info right here. Maybe we can follow up with you and get a copy of that check, and maybe we can use that as an example of, pursuing an initiative actually to fix potentially a waste in the system, more or less. So thanks for raising that. That's actually really good. We're going to keep rolling. I think the next question we have on the line, it looks like it's Bill from Edina. Bill, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. This is a tremendously interesting night talking. My question regarding the discussion earlier on heroin overdoses and addiction, it seems to me that a lot of that comes because of the medical community spending or providing too much of that medicine, too much to lock people into it. The other thing is there apparently is not enough education to people, and it should start in the elementary schools and on up. The negatives of all of the drugs, and but it also should extremely be educated to the problems when they are given the drugs. So I'd like to see something done with the medical community and with education regarding that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really good comment, and the timing is actually really good, Bill, because as I mentioned earlier, this week in the House, we're taking up a number of these bills, or a series of bills that are aimed at tackling the whole opiate issue or epidemic. One bill will require a task force to examine how healthcare providers actually do the prescription of opiates, how they go through that prescribing process. The task force is required then to present legislative ideas back to, essentially to us, to Congress, right, to actually rein in this issue or go in a different direction. The education component actually could fit in really well. I guess could actually fit in really well in addition, which actually makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to make some notes, but the Senate already passed a bill, and they did one big bill. We're passing a series of bills so we can kind of get everything on the table and then have that be a part of the broader discussion. The president is obviously very supportive of a lot of these concepts as well. So this is one area where there is going to be progress. There is going to be a solution. There is going to be a law that actually addresses and changes this epidemic issue that a lot of families are being torn apart facing. Thanks for raising that. And then the education as well as the medical community component is real key. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. I think we got Jerry on the line from Edina. Jerry, thanks for waiting.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. My question is can you continue to push Paul Ryan and our Minnesota legislators, representatives, for a standalone Kate's Law, Kate Stanley, the situation out in California? You like to attach it to other bills, but can you bring that as a standalone law that has bipartisan support?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Jerry. And just so folks know what Jerry's speaking to is this individual who was killed out in California tragically by, I believe it was an illegal immigrant who was deported several times and then came back and then murdered an American citizen. And so this case law is essentially a specific response to a portion of the law that would prevent that type of a situation from happening or occurring or having penalties tied to that, right, for reentry of someone who actually comes back. I have no problem supporting that. I will actually raise that once again with leadership. And I can't remember exactly why we haven't been able to, it's not in my sort of committee area or committee space, because I'm sort of in the tax and the healthcare and the trade area. But I'm going to ask a couple of folks why that hasn't come up, because a lot of people refer to that sort of as a common sense solution or a common sense next step that should be taken. So thanks for raising it. I'm going to ask a few people about it. Okay, I think we've got next question on the line. Looks like it might be Lena, if I pronounce that right. I apologize, from Bloomington.
No, you pronounced it correctly. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having these calls. I believe they're very valuable, and more of our representatives should do this. My question is regarding food labeling, GMO labeling and nutritional labeling that doesn't include the percentage of daily values for sugar. I know that there's been some legislation in Congress recently about that, and I'd like to know what your views are on state by state or food labeling for GMOs in general.
Sure. Well, I mean, from my perspective, I really do believe that consumers should have access to a broad range of food options, right, that allow them to make healthy decisions for you, yourself, your families. Personally, I'm concerned about allowing a patchwork of state-specific labeling laws, right? That is a patchwork, 50 different laws, 50 different requirements that food companies, you might have a General Mills in Minnesota, you might have a Campbell Soup somewhere, you might have different companies around the country that essentially going to have to package their food very differently, and it could lead to a lot of confusion among consumers as similar products are going to be labeled differently in every state. So that's one of my concerns. I'm also concerned that just allowing us such a patchwork of laws to be put in effect will reduce consumer choice, because a lot of folks that produce stuff are going to limit their choices of what they offer. So I supported legislation in the House that created the Uniform Nationwide Voluntary Labeling Program to essentially provide consumers with the information they need to make the healthy choices that they want. It respects the Food and Drug Administration's authority to make science-based decisions to ensure that the food that you or Americans anyone consumes is safe to eat. The legislation passed in July. The Senate is kind of working out, I guess, some details of that. It's possible that could come back, because there's this whole issue about, well, should the federal government preempt state law, et cetera. And it's actually, because of some of the GMOs that have occurred, it's allowed us to feed the world, essentially, right, or companies to feed the world, where normally you'd have starving populations. But again, the main thing is making sure consumers have access to all the food options that they want to use, they want to buy, and they have information available. So that's my view. And then I think you can do that without having a patchwork, essentially, of laws that are out there. Okay, it looks like we got another personal alliance, Phil from Edina. Phil, thanks for waiting.
Yes, I am.
Hey, thanks for waiting.
Yes, well, thanks for taking my call. Recently, 60 Minutes has had a coverage, and other articles have come out about party leaders in Congress pretty much requiring, strongly recommending that members of Congress, senators, spend 4 hours a day minimum in a boiler room trying to get on the phone big donors to make donations. And I'm suggesting that you take a strong leadership position in joining others who are concerned about this. I don't think any reasonable person would think that we would expect our representatives in Washington to be doing this, and something has to be done. The United decision is a bigger issue, and maybe nothing can be done about that, but at least the self-policing within the Senate and the House, that something has to be done there.
Yeah. Well, Phil, listen, thanks for the comment. I did not see the 60-minute version, but I talked to a lot of people who did watch it and had a very negative reaction, obviously. I mean, I can just tell you from my perspective, that certainly is not what I do or have to do or spend my time doing. From my perspective is this, is that, sure, when you run every 2 years, you got to spend some time, I guess, raising resources for your campaign. I probably do that for 3 days every 3 months. Because you have to, if you allocated it out, right? And it's usually, kind of as you're getting towards the end of your quarter, then you're paying more attention to it. But when I'm in D.C., it's basically just focus on your work. There are Minnesotans coming in here every single day. Literally, probably every 10 minutes, they got a different group coming in from about 9 a.m. till about 3:30 in the afternoon. And so it's essentially just, dealing with all the folks that are in Minnesota, coming from Minnesota to visit. And it's pretty minimal for me. Now, for some of my colleagues, I think there might be some of that stuff going on. And why they choose to do that, I don't know. I don't get. The self-policing component you mentioned, it is about balance, right? And kind of, what you want to spend your time, what you think you should be spending your time doing. And I think one of the reasons I've been able to get a lot of my legislation passed recently, like I did tonight, or the medical device tax repeal, or some of these anti-human trafficking initiatives, is because, I work with my colleagues even in the evening if I play hockey once a week out here, right, at 10 o'clock at night, because you get to know your colleagues a little bit better. And then, when you get to know them socially, you're not going to say anything nasty about them on the floor in debate or, in the media. And you build relationships and friendships, and then you start working together on issues. It's kind of funny how that works, right? In Minnesota, that's kind of what we do. We're used to it. But the rest of the country, it seems like some of the folks where they come from, they're not quite similar, for instance. So anyway, just those are just some of my thoughts about it. But I think so. I self-police it, and I think as far as self-policing others, I'll be kind of watching a little bit more based on that 60 Minutes report. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. If you want to ask a question, now *3 on your telephone. This is good. We're rolling through a lot of different issues tonight. Actually, it has been a wide variety. I think we've got Ann on the line from Minnetonka. Ann, thank you for waiting.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
I have been hearing with some distress lately about some Republicans broaching the issue of privatizing the VA. And it's been distressing to me in the last 5 years that there have been so many Veterans Affairs bills that have been shot down in this Republican Congress, and people say it's too expensive. And so I'm kind of, what I want to hear from you is, what do you think about the idea of privatization of the VA? And, what do you have to say to the many bills that have really been shot down that would have helped veterans a lot?
Yeah. Well, Ann, thanks for, we talked a little bit about veterans just at the opening, where I'm trying to move forward this initiative with my Democratic colleague from Massachusetts to essentially allow off-the-shelf technology for scheduling, right, that other doctors' offices do. So the VA has that, for instance. Look, privatize it? No. Should reforms be done? Yes. Absolutely. I do remember that, just a few years ago, it might have been just a year and a half ago, essentially, that, all these veterans that were waiting in line that applied for their care, someone that passed away while they were waiting to receive their care. They couldn't, essentially get in to see their doctor, right? Or they couldn't get the right specialist that they needed to see. And then the Inspector General was releasing reports indicating that the system used by the VA couldn't even accurately determine how many people on the waiting list were receiving care, how many of them potentially passed away already, et cetera. So we did pass a bipartisan, I voted for it, we all voted for it, an additional $3 billion appropriation in emergency funding. It was requested by the VA. We added different benchmarks and reforms that were tied to it to meet its obligations for the rest of the fiscal year that year. I think the sad tragedy as a part of that effort was literally we were trying to give authority for the VA to hold people accountable who had done these bad things, right? Management, changed the culture, and like 3 people literally have been fired since that time frame. So there's just a lot more that needs to be done. So, no, not privatize it, but reforms do need to be done to making sure that veterans are treated well and treated, that are not treated in an unacceptable manner. And look, in the Minnesota VA, actually really good stories. So again, we're a little bit different in Minnesota. I know St. Cloud had some issues, for instance, but that VA person just resigned or left that was heading up that effort there. And so it is a little bit of a case-by-case basis, actually. Okay, we're going to keep rolling on questions. Thanks for calling in. It looks like our next person we have on the line, it might be Gary from Minnetonka. If you're waiting, Gary, you there?
I am. Thank you for taking the call. I've got a couple items that I think for a lot of us, what's frustrating when we listen to members of Congress is they find all these things that are not working, but they don't come up with any solution. So I have a couple questions. One, you were a big proponent of the medical device tax repeal, which I agree with, but I'm curious, it benefited a number of companies, one of which was Medtronic, and then Medtronic goes about and does an inversion. It seems like you help a company, not you personally, but we help a company, and then they effectively thumb their nose at tax liabilities by doing a tax inversion. And I think that that's wrong, and I'd like to hear your comment on that one. I have another question about drug companies. Years ago, we banned advertisements for cigarettes on TV. We have advertisements for drugs on TV all the time, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars on these advertisements, and you would think it would be better spent for better research, so they wouldn't have all of these side effects that a lot of these drugs have the side effects than what they're trying to cure. And someone earlier commented about better education. Well, they could use that money to better educate not only the public but the physicians in terms of how to allocate these drugs, et cetera. And I think that would be important. And the last thing I wanted to the individuals used educational grant money that was given to him to try to purchase a ticket, airplane ticket to get to Syria. And my question is, why are we giving educational grant money directly to individuals instead of to an institution so that we can monitor that money? It just doesn't make any sense. We're sending out checks without having any follow-up to see if it's actually being used for educational purposes at all.
Good. Hey, listen, some great comments there. Let me start at the top. You mentioned the medical device tax. I will say this. The timing couldn't have been any better for the device tax repeal that went through. There were so many companies that were sending out press releases at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year this year, that said, we're taking the money now based on this, they were paying it on their sales, not on their profits, and we are essentially reinvesting it. So I was at one company in Minnesota just a month ago, and I said, what does the device tax mean for you now? He said, clearly, we're hiring 30 new people this year. We're going to hire 30 new people this year, the next year. So that's 60 new jobs. And these are really high-paying jobs, by the way. And then I had a small company that essentially said, okay, well, it means 2 new technicians and 1 new engineer. And then you had Boston Scientific, which is another large company, obviously, that is now doing a joint venture deal in new medical exploration and advancement with Mayo Clinic that they were not going to do were it not for the device tax repeal. And then GE is announcing a new similar initiative with the Mayo Clinic, only strictly because the device tax was repealed. So that's the good news. I mean, it's providing jobs, it's helping patients, it's doing all the right things, just exactly why it was such a bad policy in the first place. It's actually moving in a better direction. I'll just tell you this on the inversion side with, you got the local Medtronic situation, but we've had 51 U.S. companies that have reincorporated to lower tax countries since 1982. Now, 20 of those have happened just since 2012. We had another 3 that were announced in January this year. And so a big issue here is higher rates in the United States, right? We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Our earnings are being trapped here. We need a tax code that promotes savings, that promotes investment, that promotes hard work and innovation, and keeping the headquartered companies here. And that's where we need to go with international tax reform. I don't think the answer is put a wall around the country and fence these companies in and prevent them from leaving or penalize them. I think the answer should be incentivizing everything to be created here, grow here, start here, and be entrepreneurial, developed here in the United States. And that means addressing a broken tax code. That's my personal belief that that's the right direction to go. And I should just comment real quick on the Somalis issue, for instance, because this trial is going on. We have the trial going on with the Somalis and ISIS. You mentioned using education grant dollars that we used to get folks to go to Syria. I'm not sure why there's money that would be given to an individual rather than an institution, or how it would be better to monitor. What I'm probably going to do is just follow up again, as I do once in a while, with our U.S. attorney, Andy Luger, who's been working on some of these issues. I know him because I've been working on some human trafficking issues that he's always working on. And also with Sheriff Stanek in Hennepin County, who also has briefed me on some of the ISIS challenges or recruiting effort challenges that have been coming, of all places, right out of Minnesota, right? You wouldn't think that's the case. My colleagues question me about that all the time. But it is a real issue, a very real issue, and the FBI has a lot of other investigations going on that need to be addressed. Okay, I think we've got another question. We're going to keep rolling. We have Marshall on the line from Edina. Marshall, are you there?
Yeah, I sure am. Thanks, Congressman, for having these meetings. They're just the best. Brief comment and a question. First off, I want to thank you and your staff for the courtesy that you guys extended to us a couple years ago when we stopped in and visited Washington. We really felt that we were treated very nicely by your staff, and we got a tour. And I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate it. And I'm a lifelong yeah, it's just the best. I don't know what to do for you to help you get reelected, but I really want to participate. So I hope your people remember to call me or write me or something. Okay, I'm nervous. My question is, you've discussed patchworks a couple times this evening, and we all know the high cost of rules and regulations increase the cost of doing business. And my question is, if automobile, homeowners, boat, and business insurance is sold nationwide, why isn't health care? Let's just reduce the rules and regulations and get down to business.
Yeah, Marshall, good point. I kind of alluded to that earlier. We had one other healthcare call. First of all, thanks for stopping in. I mean, it is great when Minnesotans are out here to visit, and it's actually refreshing to hear that you enjoy talking to the staff. Most are from Minnesota. They love staying connected when people come to visit. There's Schwann's ice cream in the front office, and want to be very welcoming. In fact, it's kind of picking up with summer coming up. We're going to get a lot of visitors this summer. So remember, we can set up Capitol tours, we can set up White House tours, we can set up everything to kind of make your experience with part of America's history very memorable, right? And that's what we want to make sure that we do that. Listen, in terms of this health insurance issue, I personally think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is essentially an arbitrary or arcane law in place right now that doesn't allow health insurance to be sold across state lines. You live in Minnesota, you can't buy it from someone in Wisconsin. You can't buy it from someone in California. I have long been supportive of opening up insurance markets across state lines. Again, you buy auto insurance, other insurance, across state lines. It's going to increase more choice. It's going to increase competition. It's going to allow people to shop around. It's going to force every one of those companies to bid against each other to provide more. It's good for the patient. And you're still going to have insurance policing going on. You're still going to have some oversight going on. You're still going to need that going on, for instance. But I just think it's going to help open it up. And I'm concerned about what's happened recently where you've had a lot of healthcare insurance companies that, went into the new healthcare law, United Healthcare, for instance, and others that went in, and now they're all backing out. They're saying, we are done, we're not going to do it, we're losing too much money. Well, what's going to happen in the next year is insurance rates are going to now go up huge double digits with everyone exiting the market, less competition. We're going to see, someone told me we're going to have up to 70% increased rates on some small businesses when it gets announced later this fall. I mean, that is a tragedy. And I think this is still going to collapse of its own weight. It is a pocketbook issue for every one of us, and you and families and small business. And there is a better way. So this was not the plan it was built to be in terms of you're going to have $2,500 less in your premiums, you're going to have more choices because your deductibles have gone up and everything else has gone up, for instance. So very good point. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. I think we're going to take the next question. And it looks like now I'm trying to find out where we are in our line here, actually. So it looks like we've got the next question is might be Joan in Edina. Joan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello?
Joan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. What's up?
Okay. My question is, why has the investigation of the FBI, the Internal Revenue investigation, been stalled? And why is Al Sharpton allowed to run around owing $4 million in back taxes? And my third question is, why are we holding back on our military? They're using depleted equipment. Some of it's 11, 12 years old. The Marines are in trouble. And the president wants to cut back. I'll just listen. You can talk.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. A couple of things. Number one, you mentioned this investigation, as I think you mentioned too. I think you said the IRS, and that's actually been ongoing with the committee. We never have gotten all the answers in terms of records and emails and hard drives being lost when the IRS was found to be targeting people based on their personal beliefs. Clearly unacceptable, clearly wrong. And quite honestly, the administration just doesn't want to have any accountability. We found Lois Lerner as an example in contempt of court. The House has voted on this with bipartisan votes. And the Al Sharpton thing, I'm just not familiar. It's an individual personal case. It's been kind of hyped up in the news recently, for instance. I do know this, that recently in the House that we passed a series of bills to help rein in the IRS. They are bills that essentially will make sure the IRS is respectful of your time, of your effort, words, and of you. And it'll make sure you will not be targeted, again, personally, for what you might believe in. One initiative we just passed last week, because the IRS was asking for donor information to different charities, even though there's no reason for that donor information to be made available to the IRS, because there was suspicion or worry that that donor information was then being handed off to other agencies, and then these individuals were being targeted by agencies for audits, for other things, for personal reasons. That's wrong. That's unacceptable. That can't happen in this country. On the military side, one of the agreements that happened last year as a part of the budget agreement was the recognition that the military has been depleted in several different areas. And so there was an agreement that there would be a little bit of an increase in some of the military allocation for spending, along with some different allocations in other areas of spending. And that was the balance. That was a bipartisan deal that was agreed to. Keeping in mind that we, at the same time, have decreased federal spending every year since 2011. So spending has gone down in domestic discretionary spending, but we still have a problem with mandatory spending. Some of the entitlements and Obamacare, et cetera, are on that mandatory category and are sort of off limits to Congress unless a law is changed. And that's what's driving up the debt, especially in the area of health care. And that's where those reforms needed to be made if we're going to be able to tackle some fiscal sanity. And on the military side, look, I mean, I think everything needs to be scrutinized. You know, the military budget, anything as big as the Pentagon should be audited, should be looked at, should have acquisition reform, so you don't have wasteful programs. You know, and I voted against individual weapons programs, et cetera, that I thought were egregious. But at the same time, you got to make sure you're listening to your commanders and chiefs and your generals and your military leaders to say, well, this is what we do need if we're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z as a mission. And that has been a challenge. We're going to have to wrap up the calls. Now, if you're on the line, don't hang up, because everyone is on the phone right now. You go into a quick voicemail. Myself and everyone, we all get back to you in a short period of time. I think we do have one time for one more question. It might be Susan and Edina. Susan, if you're still there, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Hey, how are you? This is Susan Johnson.
Nice. Thanks for waiting.
We have something very much... I come from a family of 5 girls. And I know you have 5 daughters, right?
4 girls. I have 4, correct, yeah.
4. Okay, well, get going then.
Okay.
Anyway, I just want to tell you that I think you have been fabulous for our Edina or whatever. I don't know whether it's South Minneapolis too, but anyhow, I don't know, but what's going to happen with all these Somalis being poured into? I worked for a physical therapy group and a group of doctors that are, having to deal with these people, can't eat, can't know what to do, and they smell terrible. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but they don't ever take any of their clothing over. But anyway, what can we help out with?
A couple things. First of all, just thanks for the comments on your girls. And I'm used to having a household full of girls, and it brings delight and challenges every single day, actually. And I'll say this. I mean, one of the blessings of our country and our community is that we have so many different populations and cultures here, and I think if we continue to work together, respect each other, and help each other, we're going to see everyone live that American dream very successfully. I'll tell you one issue that I worked on, actually with my colleague from Minnesota, Keith Ellison, and that was just on the remittance issue for Somalis, because a lot of Somalis who come here, they have family members, and these are American citizens here, right? Many of them they're American citizens, but they want to be able to send their money back to their families, and keep them in Somalia, and help them in Somalia, and have them have a productive and safe life. And so we need to make sure that that is streamlined in a sense, that the money's not flowing to, a terrorist organization. It's not going to where it's not supposed to go. It's actually truly going to the families. And we are able to work something out that's providing exactly that. And at the same time, letting folks here in the United States live that American dream when they come here, when they get here. And then, again, this goes into fixing a broken immigration system and the whole deal. But just your comment earlier, thanks for for the earlier kudos, and I'll just say it is a privilege to represent you. It is a real challenge every day because I don't have all the answers to a lot of these problems, but I always have an open door and listen and want to do what I can. So I hope to have you tune into the next Teletown Hall. If we didn't get to you, stay on the line. You go into a voicemail. We get back to you within 24 hours. Coming up, there's a lot going on. Well, I'm sure with the presidential elections, et cetera. I'm glad we didn't. Some folks may have wanted to talk about that we didn't even have time to get to other questions. That's probably next on the docket. But we'll be hearing more of that down the road. And I just hope you continue to stay in touch and have a great evening tonight. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
The teleforum has ended.
Thank you again for participating in my telephone town hall meeting. I'm sorry I was unable to get to everyone's question, but please feel free to leave my staff a voicemail with any questions, comments, or concerns from the call. This is an emergency. You can contact my district office at 952-405-8510. We'll be sure to get right back in touch with you. Thanks again, and it's an honor serving you in Congress.